So let's do a quick update on Mike Evans, and then let's talk about some players that I would keep in my IR slot. I had a list of players in the beginning of the season that I would keep in my IR slot, and that's been a little bit updated just because, there's a lot more players on IR now. In regards to Mike Evans, we did actually hear that the hamstring injury was on his other leg. So he's had actually about 8 hamstring injuries over the past 8 seasons. They've all been on the right leg, but this hamstring injury is on the left leg. With that being said, he still does have a history of soft tissue injuries. He still is over the age of 30. So I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to have an IR stint right now, but I am projecting that he misses about 2 to 4 weeks. But we'll see what the MRI results say. It should come out today. Players that are on IR, who would you want to keep in that slot? If you have a bunch of players that are on IR, you need to drop one of them. They're just taking too much space. Let's talk about the one that a lot of people have questions about, Joe Mixon. So I would not be holding Joe Mixon on my roster unless he's the only player on IR. There's been no news out of his camp about whether or not he's going to come back, even though he's eligible to come back after this week. I highly doubt it. He's had a midfoot sprain in the past, and he's had a high ankle sprain in the past. And we just really have no information about it other than that's a non-football injury. So I would not be holding him if you have multiple players that are considering. Other than that, we have Brandon Ayuk. They've also talked about Brandon Ayuk and how he's having recovery from a multi-ligament injury. So he didn't just have an ACL injury. He had an ACL and an MCL injury. And regardless of those videos that we've seen him, even though we see him running in a straight line here, running a straight line doesn't have any comparison to gameplay where he's got to really focus on stabilization of that knee, which isn't provided by a surgically repaired ACL and MCL, at least right away. As Jerry Rice said, you got to temper your expectations. He's coming off a multi-ligament injury. He's not going to blow up right when he comes back. He is worthwhile to keep on your IR slot if you don't have anyone else on IR. Next up, we have Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, someone who I have not been high on just because of the nature of his injury, the ankle dislocation, that does provide significant long-term implications for performance. And when he comes back, he's likely not going to be ramped up to speed right away. But now we have Mike Evans that might be missing time. So you can consider Chris Godwin. You only have another week to wait. So if you've had him on your IR, there's not really much of a point to dropping him at this point in time. The thing I do want to say is, even if he does badly this first week, you got to give him a trial run. Just like the first 2 weeks of the season weren't really any strong indication of how these great players were underperforming, and then they blew up the third week. You got to give Godwin at least 2 weeks if you're going to roll with them. Jaden Reed's also someone you shouldn't necessarily drop just because he's having surgery on that Jones fracture, because the Jones fracture actually only takes about 5 to 6 weeks to recover from when surgically repaired, and he's going to be out longer than that for the clavicle fracture. Clavicle fracture is not going to show any kind of performance reduction, so we should have Jaden Reed back well in time to be performing well for the fantasy football playoffs. Aside from that, Coker I don't think is going to be that great just because it doesn't seem like Bryce Young can support more than one wide receiver. I am still high on Tajay Spears and Christian Watson, though. I think they should be players that you should keep on your IR.